After 5 years of silence, my sister sent me a box of homemade cupcakes for my birthday. The next day, she called me on the phone and said, "How are the cupcakes?" I calmly took a sip of cold tea and replied, "I gave them to your husband." She fell silent instantly, and then screamed. The news of my father's death came Tuesday morning. The call came as I was making my morning tea, the Ceylon tea with bergamot that Dad sent me every month in a small parcel. "Rebecca, honey, it's Esther Price." The neighbor's voice trembled. "Your father. He left in his sleep. I came by to check on him this morning, but—" I listened further, unable to hear. The funeral was modest. A few of my father's colleagues from the construction firm, a couple of neighbors, me. Mom and Astrid didn't come. I wasn't expecting them, but I still turned around involuntarily every time the church door opened. Neither of us had spoken in 5 years, but death is death. Even our family has to have some Cold War boundaries. A week after the funeral, I sat in the office of Arnold Forrester, my father's attorney, while he read the will. It was simple and expected. I got the house, a small but cozy one-story cottage on the outskirts of Eureka, where I grew up, and a bank account with enough money to pay off the rest of the mortgage and put away a little. Not a fortune, but good support. "Nothing much here, Rebecca." Forrester took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Thomas had always been a practical man. Everything was properly arranged, the tax issues settled in advance. "And Astrid?" The question came out of my mouth. The lawyer looked at me over his glasses. "Your sister is not mentioned in the will. Thomas had tried to contact her several times in recent years, but—" He didn't finish his sentence. He didn't finish the sentence, but I understood. Back at my father's, now my house, I started sorting through his things. My mother's picture still hung in the closet, and on the bedside table were Astrid's and my childhood pictures. It's strange how life can divide so firmly those who look from the same photograph. Astrid and I were born 2 years apart. I was the older one, silent and serious. She was boisterous and perky. Until we were 13, we were thick as thieves, despite our different personalities. And then the divorce came. I remember that night with frightening clarity. Mom came home late, smelling of wine and someone else's cologne. Dad was waiting in the living room, sitting in his favorite chair, so motionless he seemed part of the furniture. Astrid and I eavesdropped from behind the door. My parents' words flew like bullets. Treason, lies, years of pretense. Mom screamed that he was suffocating her with his correctness, that she was tired of being an appendage to his faceless life. Dad spoke softly, but there was steel ringing in his voice. This morning we found out they were getting a divorce. "Girls, you're going to have to choose," Mom said as she packed her things. "I'm going to Grandma's. Who do you want to live with?" Astrid didn't hesitate to choose Mom. I chose to stay with my father, not because I didn't like Mom, but because I knew it would be harder for him. Mom always had a circle of support. Dad just had work and us. "Traitor!" Astrid hissed when I announced my decision. "He's taken everything good out of you." I cried into my pillow that night, listening to my father walk quietly around the house, unable to find a place to go. In the morning, Astrid and Mom left, taking half of our old life with them. The first year was the hardest. Father worked from morning till night. I studied and ran the household. We rarely spoke, but a tacit understanding developed between us. He never spoke ill of Mom, never tried to turn me against Astrid. Every Sunday, we would get in the car and drive to the other side of town, where Mom now lived with Astrid and Grandma, so I could spend the day with them. My sister greeted me coldly. I could see Mom's bitterness slowly poisoning her. Every time I came over, Astrid found a way to jab. My clothes were too plain, my hobbies too boring, my friends too proper. Mom never interfered, and sometimes even encouraged this game, as if the two of them were confronting my father and me. By high school, Astrid and I existed in parallel worlds, crossing paths only at family gatherings that felt more like a Cold War than a celebration. I was studying, planning for college, working part-time at the library. Astrid changed boyfriends like a glove, hung out with a company that wasn't exactly the best roomer in town, and regularly got into trouble that her mother got her out of. College was my salvation. I went to Portland to study finance, and for the first time I felt like I could breathe. My dad came to visit me every month, bringing me home-cooked meals and news from Eureka. Astrid went to college too, but closer to home in Sacramento. We called each other on birthdays and Christmas, exchanged cards. I thought time healed, that childhood hurts were forgotten. I was wrong. After college, I went back to Jurica and got a job at a small financial firm. By then, my father had already started to get sick, a heart condition. Nothing critical, but it needed attention. I rented an apartment near his house, visited him every day. Astrid also returned to the city, got her realtor's license, and started working at a real estate agency. We even met for coffee a couple times, and I thought the ice was breaking. And then Wesley showed up. We met at a charity event our firm was hosting. He was tall, with funny eyes and an easy smile, and he worked as a manager for a construction company. Nothing special, an ordinary guy, like many. But something about him caught my eye. Maybe it was the way he listened attentively, or the funny stories he told about his working days, or the way he held my hand, as if he was afraid I would disappear. We dated for 7 months. The happiest months of my life. Wesley met my dad. They hit it off. I even introduced him to Astrid at my dad's birthday party. She was sweet, charming, asking him about his work, laughing at his jokes. I was glad. I thought maybe through Wesley, my sister and I could get closer again. Idiot. 2 weeks after that meeting, Wesley didn't show up for our date. He wouldn't answer his cell phone. I drove to his house, thinking about accidents and hospitals. Astrid opened the door, wearing his shirt, his hair damp from the shower. "I'm sorry, sis," she said, and there wasn't an ounce of regret in her voice. "We didn't mean for you to find out this way. It just happened." Wesley stood behind her back, pale, guilty-faced, but silent. I turned around and walked away. Didn't say a word, didn't make a scene. I just erased them both from my life. 3 months later, they got married. 6 months later, my mom called to tell me Astrid was pregnant. I congratulated them and hung up. Then I found out she'd lost the baby early. I wanted to call to support her, but something stopped me. Maybe tired of the endless drama, maybe afraid of being dragged back into their lives. We stopped talking. Not at all. When my father had his first heart attack, I called Astrid. Voicemail. I left a message. She didn't call back. I gave up trying. The last 2 years of my father's life were difficult. He was getting weaker before my eyes, but he stubbornly refused to move in with me or into a nursing home. "I'm going to die in my home, Becca," he said, "in the house where you and your sister took your first steps." I came every day, cooking, cleaning, making sure his medications were taken. Sometimes I stayed overnight if he got worse. On those evenings, we often talked about the past. "I blew it, Becca," he said one day, looking at the picture of Astrid and me hugging in front of the Christmas tree. "I should have fought for your mom, for your family." "It's not your fault, Dad." I took his hand, so thin now, with veins showing. "Sometimes people just stop loving each other." "No, honey, they don't. They just forget how to do it right." He died in his sleep, like most people wish he had. He went quietly, unhurt. His neighbor found him in the morning, smiling like he'd had a good dream. And now I was sitting in his office, going through papers, photos, bills. On the desk was an envelope marked Astrid. Inside was a short letter and a check for a small sum. Father had thought of her all the way through, after all. I was just deciding whether to send the letter to my sister when the doorbell rang. Astrid was there, in a black coat, dark circles under her eyes, but still as beautiful as I remembered. "Hi, Becca," she said quietly. "Can I come in?" I stepped back silently, letting her into the house. She looked around, as if she were seeing these walls for the first time, even though nothing had changed here in years. "I'm sorry about Dad." Her voice sounded sincere, but there was something in her eyes that alerted me. "I only found out yesterday from my mom." "Thank you." I didn't know what else to say. 5 years of silence had created a gap between us the size of the Grand Canyon. "I should have come sooner." Astrid took off her coat and hung it on the coat rack in the same motion she'd done when she was a child. It was hard." "I understand." I didn't understand, but I didn't want to start with a confrontation. "Would you like some tea?" We sat in the kitchen, where the 4 of us had once had breakfast, drinking tea from my father's mugs. Astrid talked about her job, about the new house she and Wesley had bought last year, about her mom, who was now into yoga and had found a new boyfriend. The usual small talk, as if between casual acquaintances. Not a word about the past, not a word about what happened between us. "I heard you got the house," she said suddenly, looking away. That was it. The real reason for the visit. "Yes," I answered calmly. "And a small amount of money. Dad left you a letter and a check. Do you want it now?" She looked surprised, but quickly pulled herself together. "Of course. It's so, unexpected." I brought an envelope. Astrid opened it, ran her eyes over the letter, looked at the check. "He always remembered you," I said. "He's been trying to get in touch." "I know." She folded the letter and put it in her purse. It was my fault. I was too proud, too hurt. I didn't say anything. I wanted to believe her sincerity, but something in her demeanor seemed contrived. Like she was playing the part of the grieving daughter coming home. "Look, Becca." Astrid reached forward and took my hand. "I know a lot of things have happened between us, but we're family. The only thing we have left in each other's lives. Maybe we could try to start over?" I looked into her eyes, so much like my mom's, so adept at lying, and I didn't know what to say. Part of me, that little girl who adored her little sister, wanted to believe. But the adult Rebecca, who knew Astrid all too well, sensed a catch. "Let's give it a try," I heard my voice say. "One step at a time." Astrid smiled, too wide, too happy for someone who had just lost her father. "All right, you know what? Come over for dinner this Friday night. It's no big deal, just family night. Mom will be there too." I nodded, feeling the anxiety building inside me. Something wasn't right about this sudden reconciliation, this ostentatious joy. But I decided to play along, if only to see what kind of game my sister was playing this time. Over the next week, Astrid called me almost every day. It was always for some insignificant reason, asking if my father had any old photo albums, asking if I remembered the name of his school friend, asking if I wanted to pick up some of my mother's old things she'd accidentally found in the attic. She ended every conversation with a reminder about Friday night dinner, as if she was afraid I'd change my mind. And I did want to say no. There was something about this sudden eagerness to make things work that made me wary. Astrid never did anything for nothing, not for her own benefit. On Thursday, she sent me a text with an address. She and Wesley had moved to Oakwood, a newly developed neighborhood on the northern edge of Utica, where mostly successful middle-class professionals lived. Not high-end housing, but definitely a step above what most people in our town could afford. Astrid and Wesley's house was typical of the neighborhood, 2 stories, with a small manicured lawn and a 2-car garage. It was just like the brochure said, a model home for a model family. I parked at the curb, grabbed a bottle of wine I'd bought on the way in, and rang the doorbell. Astrid opened, perfectly styled, wearing an elegant beige dress that must have cost as much as my month's rent. "Becca!" She hugged me as vigorously as if we hadn't seen each other in decades, not a week ago. Come in, we've been waiting for you." In the living room was my mother, Vivian Caulfield, still a beautiful woman in her 57, though the years and alcohol were beginning to take their toll. She rose as I entered, giving me an appraising look. "Rebecca," she nodded instead of greeting me. "You've lost weight." "Hello, Mom?" I kissed her cheek, smelling the familiar scent of expensive perfume and martinis. "You look great." "I'm trying." She sat up again, fixing her impeccably styled hair. "Unlike some people, it's important for me to make a good impression." Astrid threw her a warning glance. "Mom, Becca just got here. Let's not do this today, okay?" "Without what, dear?" Her mother sounded surprised. "I'm just worried about Rebecca's health. After her father's death, it's only natural." I swallowed the harsh answer, reminding myself that that was exactly what she wanted. She always did, to throw me off balance, to show me that I was as emotionally unstable as she thought I was. "Where's Wesley?" I asked, changing the subject. "Late as usual." Astrid rolled her eyes, but smiled. "You know how men are. Work, work, work." "Yeah," I replied uncertainly, though the Wesley I remembered had never been a workaholic. Astrid took me on a tour of the house while we waited for her husband. Spacious living room with leather couches, dining room with antique table, kitchen with granite countertops and the latest appliances, 3 bedrooms upstairs, 2 bathrooms. It was like something out of an interior design magazine, expensive, classy, and completely impersonal. Impressive, I said sincerely. You and Wesley are settling in nicely. We're trying, she smiled, but something in her eyes twitched. Sure, we work like hell, but it's worth it, isn't it? Before I could answer, the front door slammed, and Wesley burst into the house. The same boyish smile that had once melted my heart, but now there was gray in the hair on his temples and wrinkles under his eyes. I apologize for being late. He kissed Astrid's cheek and turned to me. Rebecca, God, it's been so long. He made a movement as if he wanted to hug me, but stopped, remembering the circumstances of our separation, and just held out his hand. Hi, Wesley. I shook his hand. 5 years ago, I'd thought I'd die if I ever saw him again. Now I felt only mildly awkward. Astrid made dinner herself, roast chicken with rosemary, potato gratin, and salad. It was good, but she didn't often stand at the stove. The chicken was a little dry, and the sauce a little too salty. Delicious, dear, Mom said, barely touching the food and more interested in the wine. You've always been talented in the kitchen. Unlike Rebecca, I remember her burning a Christmas pie when she was 16. That was the first pie I ever made, Mom. I smiled, not giving in to the provocation. I'm a pretty decent cook now. Yes, Becca's a great cook. Astrid suddenly stepped in. Remember those blueberry muffins she made when we were in high school? They were delicious. Her defense sounded so fake that I almost choked on my wine. I've never made blueberry muffins. I have a gluten allergy, diagnosed as a teenager. I can't eat regular baked goods, let alone make them. It wasn't muffins. It was a pie. I corrected gently, deciding not to focus on the lie. And Jane's mom was making it for the school fair. Oh yeah, right. Astrid didn't even look embarrassed. I got it all mixed up. Anyway, you were always the more practical of the two of us. The conversation turned to work. Astrid talked about her success in real estate sales. Wesley reluctantly mentioned some big project of his construction company. Mom, as usual, talked about herself, her new boyfriend, her yoga classes, and her plans to go to Arizona for the winter. I watched Astrid and Wesley, noting the tension between them. They barely looked at each other, and when they did, Astrid's eyes flickered with irritation, and Wesley looked away. As he handed her the salt, their fingers accidentally touched, and she jerked her hand away as if she'd been burned. How are you doing, Rebecca? Mom asked, interrupting my observations. Still single? At your age, it's starting to look disturbing. I'm fine, Mom, I replied calmly. I work at the same firm. I was recently promoted. And yes, I still enjoy my independence. Independence is wonderful, Astrid interjected with unnatural enthusiasm. Becca always knew what she wanted and went for it. I admire her determination. Mom snorted, but remained silent as she refilled her glass. Wesley squirmed uncomfortably in his chair. I heard about your father, he said, finally looking me in the eye. I'm sorry. He was a good man. Thank you. I nodded, surprised by his sincerity. Let's not talk about sad things. Astrid quickly intervened. Tonight is family reunion night. I'm so glad we're all together again. After dinner, Mom went home early, citing a headache. Astrid suggested that Wesley drive her, and he gave her a strange look and agreed. Would you stay a little longer? Astrid asked me after they left. We'll have coffee talk. We have so much to catch up on. I helped her clear the table and wash the dishes. We moved into the living room with cups of coffee, and Astrid started asking me about work, about plans, about my father's house. Are you going to live there or sell it? She asked, as if by the way. I haven't decided yet, I said evasively. I'll stay there for now. Lots of memories. Sure, she nodded. But, real estate in that neighborhood is going up in value. If you decide to sell, I could help you find a good buyer. No commission, of course, since you're my sister. Thanks, I'll think about it. I looked at my watch. I should probably get going too. I have to get up early tomorrow. Astrid walked me to the door, hugging me again. It was so good to see you again, Becca. Let's not lose touch again, okay? Life's too short for hurt feelings. I agree, I smiled, stepping out onto the porch. Wesley pulled up at that moment. Apparently, he'd just gotten back from taking my mom. I'll go get the car, he said to Astrid. In the meantime, I'll walk Rebecca out. She frowned, but nodded and went back inside. We walked in silence to my car. The night was warm, and the air smelled of jasmine and cut grass. How are you really? Wesley asked suddenly when we stopped in front of the car. I'm fine, I shrugged. And you? I've been better. He grinned wryly. You know, I've thought about you a lot over the years, about us. Wesley. I shook my head. Don't. No, listen. He lowered his voice, looking back at the house. I've made a terrible mistake, the biggest one of my life. What happened to Astrid? It wasn't supposed to go this far. I just, confused. It was 5 years ago, I said firmly. It's about time you put it behind you. And what if I can't? He took a step closer. What if I still... Stop, I put my hand out. You're married to my sister. What the hell are you thinking? That it was a mistake. I could see the desperation in his eyes. Astrid and I, we're not right for each other. We never have been. And with you, it was different. Wesley, I don't want to hear this. I opened the car door. What's past is past. You and Astrid have your own problems to deal with. You don't understand. He shook his head. It's not just family problems. He stopped, as if afraid of what he was about to say. She's what? I was involuntarily interested. It doesn't matter, he backed off. Just be careful with her, okay? Astrid hasn't changed. She always needs something from people. I nodded, not knowing what to say, and got into the car. Wesley was still standing on the sidewalk when I pulled away, seeing me off with a glance in the rearview mirror. After driving a couple blocks, I realized I'd forgotten my phone. With a curse, I turned around and drove back. I hoped I could pick it up quickly without attracting attention. I wasn't in the mood for more conversations with Wesley or Astrid. As I pulled up to the house, I noticed that the garage door was open and the lights were on inside. Leaving the car outside, I quietly walked to the side door, about to ring the bell, but stopped when I heard loud voices. What the hell were you doing? Astrid's voice was ringing with rage. What were you and my sister talking so sweetly about? Nothing in particular, Wesley snapped. I was just being polite, like you asked. Polite? She laughed, but there was no mirth in that laugh. I saw the way you looked at her. Do you think I'm an idiot? Astrid, for God's sake, he sounded tired. We have enough problems, and you're making jealous scenes. Problems? She raised her voice. You call debts problems? This is a disaster, Wesley. We're about to have the bank foreclose on our house, and you're flirting with my sister. I wasn't flirting. And now he's yelling. And I'll find the money, I told you. I just need time. Time? That evil laugh again. We don't have any. In a month, we won't be able to pay the mortgage. Do you realize what you've gotten us into? What was I supposed to do? Wesley's voice trembled. We're living beyond our means, Astrid. This house, your car, your outfits, you spend more than we make. Don't you dare put this on me. Something fell with a thud. You're the one who lost our savings in the stock market. I tried to save us. His voice sounded muffled. I was trying to give you the life you wanted. There was a silence, and then Astrid spoke more calmly, but it made her tone sound even more sinister. Listen to me carefully. We will do as I say. Rebecca inherited her father's house and money. Not a lot, but enough to get us out of the hole. I'll earn back her trust, and then she'll want to help her only sister. Astrid. Wesley sounded shocked. You can't just use her like this. It's despicable. Mean? She raised her voice again. What did she do for me? Father always loved her more, always chose her side. Even in dying, he left everything to her. Is that fair? You haven't spoken to him in 5 years, Wesley said quietly. What did you expect? Shut up, Astrid hissed. Just shut up and do what I say. Smile at Rebecca, be nice, but don't go overboard. I don't need her thinking you're being mean to her again. You understand me? And then what? Wesley asked after a pause. When you get her money, then what? Then we'll be out of her life again, Astrid said with a chuckle, as if this tearful reunion never happened. I backed away from the door, feeling my heart pounding against my ribs. So this was it. This whole reconciliation thing was just a way to get to my inheritance. I should have known better. Quietly walking back to the car, I started the engine and drove off, deciding the phone would wait until tomorrow. On the way home, I pondered what I had heard. My first impulse was to cut off all contact with Astrid, to forget she existed, as I had for the past 5 years. But then it hit me. Why not play along? Let her think her plan is working. Meanwhile, I'll find out how far she's willing to go in her deception. After all, she's my sister, I know her better than anyone. And if she wants to play, I'll accept the rules of the game. The morning of my birthday was overcast. Leaden clouds hovered over Eureka, promising rain. I'd never celebrated it much. After my parents divorced, holidays had become a formality in our family. My father usually gave me a book and made my favorite gluten-free blueberry pie. We watched an old movie, and that was the end of it. Now that he was gone, even that humble tradition was a thing of the past. I wasn't expecting congratulations from Astrid. Despite our family dinner 2 weeks ago and her active attempts to connect, deep down, I knew she was only interested in my inheritance. After that conversation in the garage, I decided to pretend I hadn't heard anything and see how far she would take her pretense. When I got home around 6 in the evening, I made myself some tea and settled into my father's chair with a book. My phone remained suspiciously quiet, no call or message from Astrid. Although I wasn't expecting congratulations, her silence after all the talk of the family reunion seemed odd. Around 7, the doorbell rang. Wesley stood on the doorstep, wearing a dark raincoat, wet from the rain, with a box in his hands and a strained smile on his face. "Happy birthday, Rebecca," he said, holding out the box. "This is from Astrid. She wanted me to tell you that she was sorry, but couldn't make it, some sort of urgent client meeting." I looked at the box, a plain cardboard cake box tied with a simple red ribbon. "Homemade cupcakes," Wesley explained, seeing my confusion. "Astrid baked them herself, said it was a family recipe or something." "She did?" I couldn't contain my surprise. I wondered what recipe she meant. I noticed that Wesley looked unusually pale and nervous. His eyes were wandering restlessly, not lingering on my face, and his fingers holding the box were twitching slightly. "Would you like to come in?" I offered, stepping aside. "It's pouring outside." No, he shook his head too hastily. "I have to go. Astrid's expecting me home by 8. "Thanks for the delivery, then." I took the box, surprised at how heavy it was. "But I'm afraid I can't eat them. I'm allergic to gluten, remember? I can't eat regular baked goods." I forgot," he mumbled. "I'm sorry. Astrid must have forgotten too." "It's okay," I shrugged. "Look, why don't you take them back? Give them to your coworkers at work. It'd be a shame if they went to waste." "Are you sure?" He hesitated, looking at the box as if it were something dangerous inside. "I'm sure. I wouldn't be able to eat them anyway." I handed the box back to him. "Tell Astrid thanks for the thought. It's nice of her." "Okay," he said after a pause. "I'll pass it along, and happy birthday again." He turned to leave, but stopped suddenly and looked at me with a strange expression, a mixture of guilt, fear, and I think, pity. "Take care of yourself, Rebecca," he said quietly. "Please be careful." Before I could ask what he meant, Wesley had already run down the steps and into the car. I closed the door, pondering the strangeness of his behavior. Something about this visit disturbed me, but I couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was. Returning to my tea and book, I tried to put the encounter out of my mind. After all, a birthday is just another day on the calendar. Around 9 p.m., the phone rang. Astrid's number popped up on the screen. "Hi, Astrid," I answered, trying to sound casual. "Happy birthday, sis." Her voice sounded unnaturally cheerful. "Did you get my present?" "Yeah," Wesley stopped by. "Thank you. That's very sweet of you." "How was it?" I could hear the impatience in her voice. "Did you try it yet?" I used my mom's recipe, but I added my secret ingredient. I took a sip of iced tea before answering. Actually, no. I'm allergic to gluten, remember? I can't eat regular baked goods. Oh, she stammered. Oh, right. I totally forgot. I'm so sorry. It's okay. I paused. I gave them to your husband. The silence in the phone was so absolute that I could hear my own breathing. A second, two, three. What? Her voice suddenly went up an octave. You did what? I gave the cupcakes to Wesley, I repeated calmly. I told him to give them to his coworkers at work. It was a shame to throw them away. There was another pause, and then Astrid exploded. You had no right. It was a gift to you. How could you just give it to someone else? Her reaction seemed completely out of proportion to the situation. A gift I couldn't physically use. I gave it to her own husband. What's so outrageous about that? Astrid, calm down, I said firmly. Why are you being hysterical? I couldn't eat them because of my allergies. What was I supposed to do? Throw them away? Yes, she screamed. You should have thrown them away. You're always doing that, ruining everything I try to do for you. Are you serious? I was getting angry now. You give me cupcakes I can't eat and it's my fault? You. She seemed to be suffocating with rage. Why do you always have to ruin everything? Why do you always ruin everything? And then she hung up. I sat staring at the phone in my hand, completely confused. What had just happened? Sure, Astrid had always been dramatic, but this reaction was beyond even her normal behavior. I tried calling her back, but she wasn't picking up. I sent a text message apologizing, though I didn't know what I was apologizing for, but got no response. Finally, I decided to go to bed early. My birthday was coming to an end just as it had begun, quietly alone. Around midnight, my phone rang again. It was an unfamiliar number. I don't usually answer these kinds of calls, especially late at night, but some kind of premonition made me pick up the phone. Hello? Rebecca Caulfield? It's an unfamiliar male voice. Yeah, it's me. This is Jason Parker. I work with Wesley Meredith. Sorry for the late call, but your number was in his contacts as an emergency. My heart skipped a beat. What's wrong? Wesley's in the hospital. My voice sounded strained. Me and another coworker are too, but we're better now. Serious food poisoning. Doctors say it could be, deliberate. Deliberate? I sat up in bed, feeling cold inside. What do you mean? The three of us were hospitalized this afternoon. The only thing we all ate was the muffins Wesley brought. He said they were from his sister-in-law, from you. What? I almost screamed. No, that's not true. The cupcakes were made by his wife, my sister. I didn't even touch them. I understand, Parker said carefully. Just, the police are going to ask questions, and I thought you should know. What hospital is he in? I asked, standing up and searching for my jeans. Eureka Memorial, ICU. But, Miss Caulfield, I didn't finish, hanging up the phone and frantically dressing. None of this made sense. Astrid's cupcakes meant for me had poisoned Wesley and his coworkers? And someone had said they were from me? What kind of insanity was this? As I entered the hospital, I could almost physically feel my throat constrict with fear. What if Wesley dies? What if Astrid really was trying to? No, that was impossible. My sister could be cruel, manipulative, selfish, but not a murderer. She just wasn't. The emergency room was the usual hospital chaos. Nurses scurrying back and forth, monitors beeping somewhere, the smell of antiseptic and fear. I walked up to the front desk, calling out Wesley's name. The nurse nodded toward the corridor. Third floor, intensive care unit, but only immediate family can go in there. I'm his sister-in-law, I said. His wife's sister. She nodded and went back to her paperwork. I headed for the elevators, feeling my knees shake. As I got off on the third floor, I heard a familiar voice, shrill, hysterical, overpowering all the hospital noises. Astrid. She was standing at the nurse's station, waving her arms and demanding something. Next to her stood a man in uniform, a policeman. I want to know who did this, she shouted. My husband is dying and you're just standing there. Mrs. Meredith, please calm down, the policeman said quietly but firmly. We're conducting an investigation. Your husband is getting all the help he needs. An investigation? She laughed hysterically. "What's there to investigate? She did it! She did it!" At that moment, Astrid noticed me. Her eyes widened, her face contorted with rage. "There she is!" she shrieked, pointing her finger at me. "That's the one who poisoned my husband! My own sister!" All heads turned in my direction. The policemen, the nurses, a couple of patients in gowns standing nearby, all looked at me like I was some kind of monster. "Astrid, what the hell is this?" I stepped forward, feeling the blood rush to my face. "You made the cupcakes! Wesley brought them in your name!" "You're lying!" She lunged at me, and the cop had to hold her back. "You've always been jealous of me. You've always wanted to ruin my life. First, you tried to take my husband away from me. Now you're trying to kill him." "What?" I couldn't believe my ears. "You stole him from me. What are you talking about?" "Ladies, please." A policeman stepped between us. "This is a hospital. If you don't stop, I'm going to have to escort you out of here." "Ask his coworkers," Astrid shouted, ignoring the warning. "They'll tell you the cupcakes were from her. She wanted to kill him for revenge. She's sick." "Officer," I tried to speak calmly, even though I was seething inside. "My sister baked the cupcakes. Her husband brought them to me today as a birthday present. I couldn't eat them because of my gluten allergy, so I gave them to him to give to his coworkers. I didn't even open them." "She's lying! She's lying!" Astrid broke free of the cop's grip. "She's not allergic. She made it up to avoid suspicion. I've been diagnosed with celiac disease since I was a teenager." I tried to stay calm, though it was getting harder and harder. "It's easy to check with my doctor. I can't physically cook or eat regular baked goods. I don't even have wheat flour at home." The policeman looked at me and Astrid carefully. "We'll need to take statements from both of you," he said at last. "But this is not the time or the place to get into an argument." "Ask his colleagues!" Astrid wouldn't stop. "They'll tell you the cupcakes came from her." "Yes, that's what they said," the policeman confirmed. "Mr. Meredith told them the cupcakes were from his sister-in-law." "See?" Astrid shouted triumphantly. "But that's a lie," I shook my head. "Why would Wesley say something like that?" "Because it's the truth!" Astrid jerked forward again. "You're a monster! You've always been a monster!" At that moment, the doctor came out of the room. He gave our group a tired look and headed for the nurse's station. "Doctor!" Astrid rushed over to him. "How is my husband? Is he going to live?" The doctor sighed, taking off his glasses and wiping them with the edge of his robe. "Mr. Meredith is in stable condition," he said. "We're doing everything we can. The next 24 hours will be critical." "What about the others?" the policeman asked. "Mr. Meredith's colleagues? They were luckier," the doctor replied. "They ate less and sought help immediately when they felt the first symptoms. Mr. Meredith, unfortunately, waited too long." They walked off down the corridor, Astrid and the doctor, leaving me alone with the policeman and the shocked nurses, who tried to pretend not to listen. "Miss Caulfield," the policeman turned to me, "we will need to take a formal statement from you, but first I'd like to hear your version of events, unofficially." I nodded, feeling completely devastated. How could I explain to him what I didn't understand? How could I prove that Astrid had made the cupcakes when her husband had said otherwise? And more importantly, why would my sister poison her own husband with cupcakes meant for me? Time flows differently in the hospital. Minutes stretch into hours, and hours shrink into moments. I sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair in the hallway all night, unable to leave, but also hesitant to enter Wesley's room. After the interrogation, the policeman didn't detain me, just took my address and asked me not to leave town. At 8 o'clock in the morning, the doctor who had spoken to us yesterday came to the nurse's station. He looked gaunt and very tired. I caught a fragment of a phrase, "But we need to inform the relatives," and my heart clenched with foreboding. "Doctor?" I stood up, approaching the counter. "How's Wesley?" The doctor, his name tag read Dr. Cohen, looked at me with professional compassion. "Are you a relative?" "Sister-in-law, his wife's sister." He nodded, taking off his glasses and wiping his eyes. "I'm very sorry, Miss Caulfield. Mr. Meredith passed away 20 minutes ago. We did everything we could, but the toxin caused permanent damage. The body just couldn't cope. I felt the ground slipping away from under my feet. Wesley's dead. The man I'd once planned a future with, the man I'd loved, lost, and then almost forgotten. He was gone. And worst of all, he died because of the cupcakes that were meant for me. The doctor asked me to contact Astrid, who wasn't answering her phone, but I didn't have to. I was intercepted at the hospital exit by 2 police officers, a familiar officer and a plainclothes woman who identified herself as Detective Kinnaird. "We need to ask you some questions. At the station," she said with an impassive face. "Am I under arrest?" I asked, feeling nauseous. "Not yet," she replied. "But it's in your best interest to cooperate with the investigation." The Eureka police station was like any other in the city, a shabby building with linoleum floors and the smell of stale coffee. I was led into an interrogation room with a metal table and a Gazelle mirror on the wall. Detective Kinnaird began by asking me questions about last night. I recounted again how Wesley brought cupcakes from Astrid, how I refused because of my allergies and gave them to him. "And you're saying your sister made those cupcakes?" she asked when I was done. "Yes. Wesley said they were from her. But Mr. Meredith's surviving colleagues say the opposite, that the cupcakes came from you." "He lied to them," I shrugged. "Ask them why. We'll never know now." Kinnaird leaned back in her chair, studying me with squinted eyes. "Miss Caulfield, do you realize what this looks like? 3 people have been poisoned by cupcakes they say came from you. One of them is your ex-boyfriend who dumped you for your sister. That's a strong motive for revenge." "That was 5 years ago." I shook my head. "If I wanted revenge, would I have waited that long?" "People wait longer," the detective shrugged. "Especially when the occasion presents itself, like the death of your father and the sudden reunion with your sister." "I'm allergic to gluten," I said firmly. "I can't physically bake with wheat flour. It's dangerous for me." "We'll check." She nodded. "But that doesn't prove innocence. You could have bought everything you needed specifically for the occasion and then gotten rid of the evidence." At that moment, an officer entered the room and whispered something in Kinnaird's ear. She frowned, nodded, and turned to me. "We searched your house. As you said, no traces of baked goods or ingredients were found." I exhaled a sigh of relief. "I told you. Everything at home had been turned upside down after the search. I started to mechanically put things back in order, but quickly gave up. What did it matter what order the books were in on the shelf if my life was falling apart?" The ringing of the phone snapped me out of my musings. It was an unfamiliar number. "Hello? Miss Caulfield? This is Jason Parker, Wesley's colleague. We spoke yesterday." "Yes, I remember. How are you feeling?" "Better, thank you. David and I were discharged this morning. We heard about Wesley. I'm so sorry." "Thank you. I didn't know what else to say. I have something to tell you about those cupcakes." His voice sounded strained. "When Wesley brought them over, he actually said they were from you. But then he acted weird, like he didn't want to eat them. David joked about it, and Wesley defiantly took one and ate it. But only one, and I think it was just for show." "And when did the symptoms start?" "About an hour later. First David's, then mine. Wesley held on the longest, but when he collapsed, he paled like he'd seen a ghost. And you know what he said before he passed out?" "She did it after all. She really did it." "She did?" I clutched the phone. He said, "She?" "Yes, he did. I thought he meant you, but now I'm not so sure. Especially after I found out about your allergies. Why would someone with allergies like that bake ordinary cupcakes? Did you tell the police that?" I tried to keep my voice down. "Yeah, of course I did, but I'm not sure they gave it much thought." "Thank you for calling," I said sincerely. "It means a lot to me. There's something else, about Wesley and Freya Nolan." "Freya?" That name didn't ring a bell. "His co-worker in marketing. She ate the cupcakes too, but only a little, so she was only mildly poisoned. She and Wesley were close, and he was going to leave Astrid." I kept quiet, digesting the information. Something wasn't adding up. "How do you know?" I asked. "Wesley rented an apartment 2 weeks ago. He asked me to help him move in. Said he couldn't live with Astrid anymore, that they were fighting all the time." "And you told that to the police?" "Yes," he said quietly. I think it's important for the investigation. After my conversation with Parker, I sat still, staring into space. The picture was getting more and more confusing. If Astrid knew Wesley was going to leave her, she had a motive to get rid of him. But then why send the cupcakes to me? And why did she get so mad when she found out I gave them back to Wesley? No, something didn't add up. Unless I was the original target. Maybe Astrid really wanted to poison me. That would explain her reaction when she found out Wesley got the cupcakes. But why would she kill me? Because of my father's inheritance? Because of a lingering grudge? It seemed crazy. I dialed Detective Kinnaird's number, but it went to voicemail. I left a message asking her to call me back as soon as possible. Then I found information about Freya Nolan on social media, a young woman with long dark hair and a bright smile. Several photos showed her with Wesley. Corporate events, apparently. Nothing overtly romantic, but they were standing close together, and their gazes read something more than friendship. I wrote down her contact information and the address of the hospital where she was still in. I needed to talk to her in person, to hear her side of the story. But before I could do anything, the doorbell rang. Detective Kinnaird stood at the door. "Miss Caulfield," she nodded at me. "May I come in?" "I have some news that will interest you." I stepped back silently, letting her into the house. Her expression was unreadable, but something in her eyes made me tense. "We spoke with Mr. Meredith's colleagues," she said, sitting down in the offered chair. "Those who survived the poisoning. Their testimony is interesting." "I just spoke to Jason Parker," I said. He told me about Wesley's last words, and about Freya Nolan. Kinnaird raised an eyebrow. "Yes, Miss Nolan." She gave a detailed statement. According to her, Mr. Meredith was planning to leave his wife. They had been dating for the past 3 months, and he had already rented an apartment to live in together. And Astrid knew about this? Apparently, yes. The detective nodded. Miss Nolan claims that 2 weeks ago, Mrs. Meredith made a scene in their office. Screaming, threatening. Security had to escort her out. And no one connected it to the poisoning? I couldn't believe my ears. "We're investigating all leads," Kinnaird replied coldly. "But the fact remains that your ex-boyfriend said the cupcakes came from you." "But they didn't. Astrid made the cupcakes. Why would she do that if she wanted to poison Wesley?" "Who said she wanted to poison Wesley?" Kinnaird asked quietly, watching my reaction carefully. I froze, struck by a sudden realization. "Do you think she wanted to poison me?" "We're looking at every possibility, including this one." "Are you going to arrest Astrid?" "Not yet." The detective shook her head. "You're no longer a prime suspect, Miss Caulfield. Although I wouldn't leave town anytime soon if I were you." When she left, I sat still for a long time, trying to process what I'd learned. Wesley's dead. Astrid was probably planning to poison me, but ended up accidentally poisoning her own husband. Now she's trying to make me look like a murderer to save herself. I had to talk to Freya Nolan, find out everything she knows, and together we had to make Astrid answer for her crime, not just for justice for Wesley, but for my own peace of mind. The next few days were a blur. I didn't leave the house, avoiding the prying eyes of my neighbors and the prying questions of the local newspaper reporters who had gotten wind of the poisoning story. The case for Jurica was out of the ordinary. Death by poisoned cupcakes, accusations between the sisters, a love triangle. All the ingredients for a small-town sensation. Detective Kinnaird called me the 3rd day after Wesley's death. "Miss Caulfield, we need you to come down to the station." Her voice sounded subdued, but I could detect something akin to satisfaction in it. We had a new development in the case. When I entered the familiar office, Kinnaird was sitting at her desk, poring over some papers. She nodded me to the chair across from her and got down to business without preamble. "We got a warrant for your sister's cell phone," she said, laying out the printouts in front of her. "And we found something interesting. Correspondence between her and Mr. Meredith from the night before the incident." She slid one of the sheets toward me. It was a screenshot of the messages. I looked up at the detective. "She blackmailed him," I said quietly. "Forced him to deliver poisoned cupcakes." "Sounds like it," Kinnaird nodded. Though Mrs. Meredith herself claims she meant only that the cupcakes were special, festive, and she wanted you to appreciate them fresh. "And you believe her?" I couldn't contain my sarcasm. I believe the facts, Miss Caulfield. She pulled out another sheet. And the facts are that the day before the incident, your sister had been searching the internet for information on poisons that are tasteless and odorless, and how to bypass the autopsy. I'm creeped out. It's one thing to suspect your sister wanted to kill you, and quite another to have it documented. We arrested your sister this morning, Kinnaird added after a pause. She denies all charges and continues to claim that you are the real killer. What's going to happen next? I asked, feeling strangely devastated. Astrid's arrest should have been a relief, but instead, I felt only fatigue and bitterness. The court will determine a preventive measure. Given the severity of the crime and the evidence, it's likely she'll remain in custody until trial. The detective gathered the papers into a folder. You don't need to stay in town anymore, Miss Caulfield, but we can contact you if any further statements are needed. As I walked out of the station, I took a deep breath of fresh spring air. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. Astrid's under arrest. I'm no longer a suspect. I could go back to my normal life. But could life ever be normal after this? On the way home, I stopped at my mom's house. I don't know if it was to support her or just to make sure she knew the truth. The door didn't open right away. Just as I was about to leave, my mom appeared on the doorstep, her hair disheveled, her robe wrinkled, a glass of something clearly alcoholic in her hand. "Oh, it's you," she pursed her lips. "Come to gloat?" "Mom," I shook my head. "Can I come in?" She shrugged and stepped aside. The house was chaos, clothes strewn about, unwashed dishes, empty bottles. Mom had never been a model of order, but it looked especially depressing now. "I heard they arrested Astrid," she said, dropping into a chair and taking a big sip from her glass. "That was your doing, wasn't it? She was always Daddy's little girl, always got what she wanted." "Mom, Astrid tried to kill me," I said calmly, though I was seething inside. "She poisoned the cupcakes that were meant for me. Wesley died by accident." "Bullshit," she snorted. "My girl would never do such a thing. You set the whole thing up to get back at her for Wesley. Always jealous of her. Always." "The police found proof," I interrupted her. "Astrid's cell phone records, a history of poison searches." Mom was silent, staring into her glass. Something in her face had changed. The mask of confidence had cracked, revealing fear and doubt. "She was talking about it," she said in a different, quiet voice. "About how nice it would be if you were gone. But I thought it was just talk, just words." I froze, not believing my ears. "You knew?" My voice shook. "Did you know she was planning to kill me?" "No!" She raised her head sharply. "I mean, she said something about wanting to teach you a lesson, that you didn't deserve your father's inheritance, that it wasn't fair. But I never thought that she..." She didn't finish the sentence, instead downing the rest of her drink. "And you didn't warn me," I said, not as a question, but as a statement of fact. "You didn't call, you didn't say, 'Hey, Rebecca, your sister's talking about killing you, be careful.'" "She would never do that." Mom switched to screaming again. "It's all your fault. If you hadn't gotten the house, if you hadn't flaunted your perfect life with a perfect job and a perfect father who always loved you more. Astrid just wanted justice." I looked at this woman, my mother, and didn't recognize her. Or maybe it was the other way around, seeing the real her for the first time in years. Selfish, petty, unable to recognize responsibility, either her own or that of her beloved daughter. "I'm leaving," I said, rising. "I won't bother you anymore." "Yes, go away." She stood up too, swaying. "Go away as you always have gone away. Leave us like you left us when you chose your father. You've always thought only of yourself." I didn't answer. I just turned and walked out. Outside, I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself down. Mom had always had a way of hitting the sore spots, but now her words no longer had any power. I knew the truth, about her, about Astrid, about myself, and that truth was liberating. The next weeks were spent preparing for trial. I testified, met with the prosecutor, tried to get my life back on track. But it wasn't easy. People whispered behind my back. Some openly avoided me, as if the poisoning were contagious. I realized I couldn't stay in Urich after all this. Astrid's preliminary hearing began a month after her arrest. I sat in the courtroom, listening to the prosecutor lay out the charges: premeditated murder of Wesley Meredith and attempted murder of Rebecca Caulfield. Astrid sat at the defense table, pale, drained, but still beautiful. She didn't look in my direction. Her lawyer was trying to build a defense on the fact that all the evidence was circumstantial. Yes, she was baking cupcakes. Yes, she asked her husband to take them to me. But that doesn't prove there was poison in the cupcakes or that she knew about it. Mom's testimony was confusing, contradictory. She tried to defend Astrid, talking about what a good daughter she'd always been, how she'd taken care of her. But under the prosecutor's cross-examination, her story began to fall apart. "Mrs. Caulfield, is it true that your daughter Astrid told you she wanted to hurt her sister?" the prosecutor asked. "No," Mom shook her head. "I mean, she was upset. She thought the inheritance was unfairly distributed, but they were just words." "Just words?" The prosecutor raised an eyebrow. "What about the phrase, 'I know how to get rid of Rebecca once and for all'? Were those just words, too?" Mom turned pale. I don't remember that. Let me refresh your memory." The prosecutor picked up a piece of paper. "This is your statement to Detective Kinnaird 2 weeks ago. I quote, 'Astrid said she knew how to get rid of Rebecca once and for all, that she had a plan. I didn't think much of it. I thought she was just mad.'" Mom was silent, looking down at the floor. "Mrs. Caulfield, is it true that you knew of your daughter's plan to poison her sister?" "No." She raised her head. "No, I didn't know. She said all sorts of things when she was angry, but I never thought she was really—" "Even when she showed you a bag of white powder and said it was special seasoning for Rebecca?" The prosecutor stared at her point blank. Mom broke down. Tears streamed down her face, smearing her makeup. "I thought it was a joke," she whispered. "Just a stupid joke. She was always so dramatic. I didn't believe she was capable of—" I couldn't listen to this anymore. Standing up, I quietly walked out of the courtroom. The sun was shining outside. People were hurrying about their business. Life went on. But for me, something had irrevocably changed. My own sister wanted to kill me. My mother knew about it and did nothing. What kind of family can recover from something like that? The verdict came in 2 weeks later. Astrid was found guilty of the premeditated murder of Wesley Meredith and the attempted murder of Rebecca Caulfield. The judge imposed a maximum sentence of life in prison without parole for 25 years. As the verdict was announced, Astrid sat motionless, staring at one point. Only when the guards led her to the exit did she turn and look directly at me. There was no remorse or regret in her eyes, just cold, burning hatred. Mom didn't come to the announcement of the verdict. I found out from the neighbors that she started drinking even harder after the preliminary hearing. One day, an ambulance took her away. Alcohol poisoning. She survived, but refused to go to rehab, refused to admit she had a problem. Typical of her. Never admitting fault, always blaming others. I sold my father's house a month after the trial. Couldn't stay in it anymore. Couldn't stay in Urich. Too many memories. Too many whispers behind me. Too many ghosts. On the day I left, I walked around the empty rooms one last time, saying goodbye to the house that had once been my refuge. My father's study was where I stayed the longest. It was where we spent evenings reading, where he taught me how to manage the family budget, where we talked about everything. "I'm sorry, Dad," I whispered, running my hand across the empty desk. "I couldn't keep your house. I couldn't keep our family together." But somewhere deep inside, I knew he would have understood. That he would want happiness for me, not attachment to the past. That sometimes you have to let go in order to move on. I moved to Portland, far enough away from Jurica to start over, but not so far that I felt completely disconnected from my roots. I found a job at a finance company, rented a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood, got a cat. A simple, quiet life was exactly what I needed after everything I'd been through. Sometimes I received letters from my mom, incoherent, full of accusations and self-justifications. I read them, but I didn't respond. What could I say? That I forgive her? That would be a lie. That I hate her? That would be too easy. The truth was, somewhere in the middle, I no longer felt anything for this woman. No love, no hate, just a tired indifference. There were no letters from Astrid. I knew she was serving time in a maximum security women's prison in the northern part of the state. Sometimes I caught myself thinking I might visit her, asking, why? What have I done to deserve such hatred? But then I realized I already knew the answer. I hadn't done anything special, just being myself, just being loved by my father, just living my life. That was enough for Astrid to want to destroy me. Time passed. The wounds slowly healed. I learned to trust people again, to find joy in the small things again, to laugh without guilt. It wasn't easy, but every day it got a little easier.
Любі глядачі, дякую вам за перегляд, ставте лайки та підписуйтесь на канал. Також напишіть в коментарях, чи погоджуєтесь ви з Дженніфер, чи вона мала розказати все матері, чи ні, чи мала все розказати своєму коханцю щодо свого чоловіка, чи ні. І також прокоментуйте, чи вам сподобалось це відео.